Good morning and welcome to Office Hours. This is a show where we answer your technical questions as they relate to media and event production 7 days a week. Today's a focus on audio day, so questions are stacking up and your votes matter. Bill, let's get into it. What's our first question?
Sure. We lead off with a question from Jeremy Murray in St. John, New Brunswick. Yesterday during the second hour, PRIM was mentioned, and I was wondering if a quick explanation of what it is could be provided.
Alex.
I'm not 100% certain, but what I think you heard was prem, which is on-prem. Maybe it's something different. Let us know if we misunderstood you. But usually if we say on-prem, it just means that all the hardware is on location as opposed to the cloud. So that probably was what was being referred to there. But if you think that we're inaccurate, put another question in.
Bill?
Yeah, just note that I think that's a shortening of on-premises, so that's really what we're kind of indicating is that all the equipment is in a particular location rather than the virtual production that we are often discussing here.
Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and it says, Sphere Entertainment announced the world's second Sphere will be in Abu Dhabi. Thoughts? And he's got a link there to a Mix Online story.
Courtney.
Well, who has billions of dollars? Abu Dhabi, and they spend it on attractions to bring the tourist trade back to Abu Dhabi in a time of strife in the Middle East. I think it might be a good investment for them to try and bolster their tourist trade. They're going to take a loss on it, obviously, for quite a number of years. But, they have all that oil money over there and just itching for something to put it into. They've tried a number of interesting architectural and environmental, experiments in the past, so this will be added to that list.
Alex?
Yeah, a lot of the Middle East is trying to figure out ways to diversify from oil. So building attractions, doing other things, that type of thing is a pretty useful thing. And I think that the Sphere needed to show that it was there. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see a couple spheres in the Middle East that are there. There's plenty of money. The cost of that production is not particularly, they just flick a couple dollars on off the outside of the roll. So to build one of those things. And so I wouldn't be surprised. There's a variety of really big activations happening in Saudi Arabia, in Abu Dhabi, in a variety of places in the UAE. And I think that, that you're going to see probably more of that rather than less.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York is up next. With internet speeds 398 down and 386 up, what might cause Zoom to be choppy and intermittent for the host feed for the participants, while the participants' feeds are fine? Zoom client is up to date on the Windows 11 machine, and yes, it is on Wi-Fi.
Jeff.
Zach, you know the answer. We can tell from your question. Have you tried, diagnosing problems is a process of elimination. And you obviously know that everyone's going to ask you if you're on Wi-Fi, and there's a reason for that, because it's a big culprit of exactly the problem you're describing. So it's a process of elimination. If you can, even if it means temporarily running a 100-foot Ethernet cable, try to keep everything the same, plug that in, and make sure you're explicitly turning off Wi-Fi for that test so you don't have to worry about priorities. Make sure you're on Ethernet, try it, see if it's any different. The other thing you do is you try a different computer device. Even if you try a phone on that same Wi-Fi to see, okay, maybe it's the computer, because if the Wi-Fi is just fine with your phone, we don't know a lot about your computer. If it's an old computer, it can be resource bogged down by just doing Zoom and video, and you also want to look at all the other software you may be running in the background. Every one of those little things like Stream Deck and everything else, is running a little utility in the background. So look at all the software that might be running, whatever antivirus, all the stuff that could be running. So it really is just process of elimination, but the first place to start.
Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. It's probably your Wi-Fi. It depends on a number of things, proximity to your Wi-Fi. I'm on Wi-Fi occasionally, not now, but I was on Wi-Fi here on office hours for years, but the computer is just 3 feet from the Wi-Fi access point. So that makes a big difference, distance to the access point, and also the type of Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi 6 is a lot faster and more robust, although it doesn't go as far. So you have to make sure in proximity to the, if you don't have access to using an Ethernet plug, that is the best way. But if you have to use Wi-Fi, and you're close enough to the access point, you can use the higher frequency Wi-Fi 6. You'll have less contention with all the Internet of Things. You know, I've got all these Wi-Fi based bulbs and home, Google Home and Alexa and all those on 2.4 gigahertz, which travels through walls better. However, it gets kind of crowded, and all those Internet of Things are always pinging the router. Another thing to worry about is Windows 11. It has a tendency of going out and pulling in updates and putting them on the hard drive without your permission or without your knowledge. And anytime it's writing to the hard drive, it sets some interrupts that are kind of interrupt your Wi-Fi signal, interrupt everything else going on your computer background processes in that process. So make sure, turn off interrupts if you're going to be doing a show. I mean, turn off updates. Pause updates on Windows 11 so you make sure that it's not downloading stuff in the background while you're trying to do a show.
Alex.
The reason that Wi-Fi is a problem, it doesn't really matter how fast it is. It does matter a little bit, as Courtney said, how close you are. The problem with Wi-Fi is that it was never built for real-time communication. And so what happens is that every time a device goes in and out of the radius of an access point, the access point goes and talks to it. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? What do you got there? Do you want to jump on? Do you not want to jump on? Do you got a password? Do you got a key? What's going on? And while it's doing that, it's a little ADD, and it starts dropping packets. It's not paying attention to your stream anymore because it's talking to the new device. And so the issue that you get into is, like, let's say you're in you could be in a giant company with a 10 gig connection going in, and even if you run a test, you'll get 500 up, 500 down, 1,000 up, 1,000 down. It doesn't matter. People walking down the hallways and their phones, going in and out of the APs. It only happens when there's handshaking is really when that happens. And so it's when people are going by within 150 feet of that AP. It may not travel well at 150 feet, but it can see it. so it says, hey, how's it going? And so all those negotiations cause it to drop. And you hear this, this little phasing that happens and dropouts that happen as it's trying to figure those things out. When you open up, if you live somewhere where you open it up and you see 80 Wi-Fi points, you're in trouble. That's going to be a problem. So you really want to think about, it doesn't really, you can think about all these things and try to explain to yourself why Wi-Fi is okay, but it's never really going to work. Like it's, you just have to understand that you're going to have breakup. The only time we haven't seen breakup is when no one else is in the house. My parents live in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally there's not another house within a half a mile. And so at that house with nobody else in the house, nothing moving, it's like Ethernet. But that's about it. Like that's the only time we've ever seen it be totally smooth is when nothing's moving. No Wi-Fi devices are moving at all around that device. So I know people think, well, there's some way to fix it. There is no way to fix Wi-Fi dropouts other than a piece of copper. So taking Ethernet and connecting it, and we send people 100-foot cables and 200-foot cables. I have a cable going out of my office here that goes over to where my wife does her shows because Wi-Fi. So you really have to have the Ethernet.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas comes up next. New Shure Axient digital product announcement. With all the recent product development in the wireless realm, should we expect this to be a full-fledged wireless multi-channel audio system, competitor to Sennheiser's Spectera, or simply a low-latency digital in-ear monitor?
Go ahead, Chris.
So what it looks like is this is actually just a new transmitter with like a remote control function to expand on the Axient environment. So Axient is it's the best thing that exists in the world, just like flat out. In my circle of anyone that I know, it is the only conversation that anyone's having. It's the best thing you can have. So the possibilities with something like this that people need to understand is there's a lot of different applications in wireless, and sometimes a belt pack this big it's just too big, right? Sometimes it just does not work. And so I'm curious to actually look and research more on this device. Because it really, really can open up a lot of possibilities. Also, if you have a remote control function, if you're off on the sideline and there's something going on with your artist and they are performing in front of thousands of people, let's say, whatever, the opportunity to go in and have more finite control of their environment while they're performing, while it's happening, without without anyone knowing, essentially, that's really, really powerful. So yeah, there's a ton of different options for these things. I also was just researching. They make I forget the model number, but they make a smaller belt pack, actually, transmitter, excuse me. That really it's quite small, and it's what they use for like Broadway, things like that. So you can really, really hide these things. So yeah, that's my answer.
Courtney.
Yeah, I was trying to find some more information on it. This maybe they're talking about this ADX1, which is a new belt pack transmitter. But I was wondering if anyone knows, do they make one that has both the wireless mic transmitter and an IFB receiver built into a single body pack? Because Zaxcom makes something like that with their ZaxNet, which is handy if you have to have IEM for news gathering or any remote reporting, so that you don't have to have two belt packs, one for the IEM and one for the microphone transmitter. It makes it very handy, and with these digital systems, I would seem that it would be able to do that. I don't know if you know that, Chris, or if you know information on that.
I know that the Shure units, I mean, these are all like kind of half rack space boxes. There's no way to fit all of that material in something that's that small and on your body. And plus you have like physical connections that have to go to it. There's a whole other side that makes this stuff run that wouldn't be feasible to have on an artist moving around wirelessly.
Next question.
Craig Kadoki out of Toronto is up next. Has anyone seen the AES news on Midas? The new HD96-AIR console and the Stream Deck integration on all HD96s, and he's referencing a MidasConsole.com article there.
Jeff Francis, go ahead.
So I took a look at this when I saw Craig's question this morning, and so what they've done is they've taken their HD console and they split away, they've taken the faders off of it. So they've got this fly pack, it's still got, I think, a 21-inch touch screen for all your controls, and then they have a fader pack, and you can hook up to 5 fader packs via USB. It's not a rack mount, so it doesn't really fill the place of the Midas rack or the Behringer rack. I mean, obviously this is a higher quality being the Midas. You're going to use the Midas stage box, which have the Midas pre's. One thing about this is Midas comes stock with AES 50 and HyperMac, which are great single place transmissions. So they work over Cat5 cables, but they do not use the same packaging layer as Ethernet, so you do not run them through switches. It's a direct connection, much lower latency, much higher channel count, but it's a very closed system. So you need to put extra cards in this if you want to do Dante, and it does have places for those cards to do Dante or Maddie or those kind of things. But again, I think this is more of a tour live sound product, and maybe not an install, not a hybrid production like we often talk about. But it is the Midas. They've basically made their top-end HD console cheaper by making the control surface smaller and removing those faders. I worry about faders that plug in via a USB cable, and that's my control. But it could be handy if you have a front of house area that is somewhat cramped, and you could lay that out in different ways with different number of fader packs at different shows. I didn't look into the Stream Deck integration, so I'm curious if anyone knows anything about that.
Yeah, I don't know too much. I saw the video demo of them configuring, and I wasn't clear if the Stream Deck is connecting directly to the console or not, and if is it using BitFocus plugin? Is it using the native Stream Deck? I don't know, but it looks very cool and obviously very useful. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this looks like essentially kind of a Midas version of the Waves LV1, which is like, I mean, you have to think if you're touring, and yes, this is absolutely a touring thing. This is about keeping space as available as possible. If you have no room in the places that you're playing or in the places that, in the way you're traveling, if you're all in a van, let's say, it's hard to get like a full-size console in there to bring it with you. But something like this fits in a suitcase. This is really, really small, and the whole point of fader packs and fader banks that break apart, I mean, is you can have actually like a large mixing system that collapses into a tiny, tiny format and quickly. So, I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing. And then integrating actual Stream Deck into it, what they're doing is if you look at like the old like Digidesign console, SC48s up to like current like SXLs, things like that, where you have all these snapshots and just recallable settings that you need, maybe per song settings, maybe, I mean, really like theater production. If you think of that, you're doing cues, you're doing all these things. Stream Deck is such a like accessible format. You can really program like anything through Stream Deck. That's a really powerful combination in something that is very small and probably very light to travel with. So that's intriguing for sure.
Alex,
do we know if does it have a Ethernet as well, or is it just USB as far as how it connects to the console? I was trying to dig that up. The reason I ask is that a lot of times we've used X touches and we put a bunch of them onto one, and it doesn't have to be a Behringer. We'll use an X touch, and I think we've had, if I remember correctly, 5 or 6 of these all connected to a QL1. And the reason we do that is that the QL1 will manage all the audio for all of the tracks for a conference. This is just slightly different than a concert. And they all have their own sections of that QL1 that they're using. Where it's a simplified, it's a handful of mics and some play out and so on and so forth. Then we have individual A2s that are able to manage most of that audio. But the advantage of that is that our A1 can sit over top of all of them and just be sampling what's going on and making corrections without having to, being able to make adjustments to it. We tried it with separate mixers, and we found that we started with putting Midas the M32s in the room. We couldn't get the A2s to stop fiddling. So they kept on, and so we finally just moved them. We moved them all so that they were within arm's reach of the A1, so that they could be told like stop doing that, because there's a thing when you're on a it feels like for many A2s or even A1s, there's a feeling like you have to be doing something all the time, and sometimes you don't. You can just let it ride. So anyway, so that was, but we found that to be very effective. It got everybody into the same room. Everything was piped over Dante back into that QL1 from multiple locations, and then that was controlled. Jeff, were you able to find out whether that has Ethernet or not, or is it? Or you don't know?
As far as I can see, the fader packs just connect via USB. Now there's control of the console over Wi-Fi. I assume Ethernet to a Wi-Fi router and an iPad app. So I assume you could do all the control over Ethernet. The one place I saw, I don't know if I looked at an earlier press announcement, but the specifications were not finalized and the product price was not finalized. And maybe that might have finished now, but they were still in final testing of this product and tweaking specifications.
Yeah, makes sense.
And in the chat, Craig Kadogi is saying that the Air also has 2 HDMI outputs, which is interesting. It makes me wonder if they're going to allow you to use an external touchscreen display, which could be cool. I mean, you could have a really cool rig with touchscreen displays as a secondary option. So that's very interesting. I'll have to follow up with this. Next question.
Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach and here on the panel says, does this turn all edited video content into second-class citizens? And he's got a quote there. YouTube's rolling out a new captured with a camera label that works with C2PA content credentials. And that's referencing the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, a new body, I guess.
Jeff.
Yeah, so really, I'll just be curious to hear if folks know more about the label. But of course, What they talk about is, the authenticity of live shot footage, knowing that that's really how it was shot, which is great. But it seems to imply, my understanding is that then, of course, if you want to put it into editing software, whether it's just to tweak a little bit at the beginning of the end or completely fake the whole thing, now it no longer deserves that label. And that seems like it could really make a big difference in terms of the trustworthiness of content.
Courtney.
Yeah, this was, first of all, you have to create the standard, and then you've got to get the manufacturers of camera equipment and phones to initiate and sign on to that standard. And this particular standard adds metadata to any picture or video file that authenticates basically that it was camera original and has not been touched by any type of AI software, so that you can authenticate it. Now, there is plans, once the standard is developed, and it's just been recently agreed upon, so the camera manufacturers are just now starting to implement it in metadata. Next step is to have Adobe or the editing software also to maintain that metadata, load that metadata in, and track what is done to that camera original. And if it's outputting a different file other than the one that came in, it is possible to maintain provenance throughout an edit as long as you don't add anything or remove anything or alter the image in any way, but just edit together different pieces of it, supposedly. So we'll see if they're able to implement that and maintain the metadata throughout, so that YouTube can then put up a little flag that says, certificate. It's like a certificate of authenticity for that particular video that just warrants that it has not been added to with AI or edited. Things have been edited out. Of course, if you just crop somebody out by zooming in a little bit, maybe all the video has to maintain its original aspect ratio and cropping. I don't know what the rules are, but that's going to be a difficult road to travel for authentication of video.
Alex.
I think that the goal here is that if someone says, I went and shot this and I uploaded it to YouTube, that this is news or it's breaking news, that I saw this UFO or I saw this launch or I saw this drone or I saw whatever, or I saw this thing happen, that someone would take it directly from their camera as a news item and throw it up online. And I think that I think it's much more vertical than we think. I don't think it's trying to authenticate everything that goes onto YouTube. It's just saying if someone grabs something from the, again, on a camera, that they can say, I put this up online and it was actually authenticated. I think if they try to do any more than that, no one's going to use it. I think that, you have to, I remember working at this company that had, some pretty valuable things in one of the rooms, and you had to go to the manager and you had to get them to unlock it. And then you had to, they had to come over, and then there was this two key thing and everything else. And people just ended up taping the door open, or blocking the door open, or doing a bunch of other things. When you make something too secure, then people just stop using it. And I think that the problem that they're going to have here is that that if they, everybody's editing everything on YouTube. So, and I don't know how they're going to be able to manage provenance in a way anytime soon. And I don't know how much people are going to care. I just don't know, there are people that care, but I'm not sure if the viewers care like that. And then the problem is if the viewers care and enough of the creators, and if this is too hard for the creators to implement easily, then no one's going to use it. So it's, because it's just another hoop that they have to go through. The news organizations somehow think that this is going to, I think that's the people who are really pushing for it because they want people to trust the video. But, you haven't been able to trust the video for a century. So you just have to be kind of careful of really thinking about that, because there's a lot of ways to manipulate how someone sees something that doesn't require you to do any editing. Just put the camera a little higher, use a wide angle lens instead of a long lens. Pick which direction you're shooting. All those things manipulate the viewer. And so I don't know if it, it's easy to say, well, then we shot it, but as someone who's been at a lot of these events that people take pictures of and video of and report on, oftentimes what they're showing you is not true.
Bill.
So I looked it up because I hadn't heard of this, and it seems like a problem everybody's thinking about. Can we trust what we see? That's the big overall discussion. And I was interested in the partners they have in this coalition for content provenance and authenticity. It's pretty big guns: Adobe, Amazon, BBC, Google, Intel, on and on. The one that surprised me was OpenAI, and I just think they understand equally that the stuff they are generating is causing this disquiet across the world about is generative going to get so good that we can't tell the difference, and what that means in terms of sociology for the planet if literally you get to the point where complete distrust reigns on everything you see. That's a psychological difficulty that the world is going to have to navigate here. It's not going to be an easy road to hoe, in my opinion.
Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to add, Alex, what you're saying, of course, like a lot of things, the intent is good to do just that, to say, I was at that earthquake. Yes, I actually captured this on my phone. But if this label starts catching on, then that's something I would start like telling my mom, hey, you send me all these news stories, and I have to tell you that 90% of them, if you just checked Snopes first, you would have known it's not real. So I would start to say, okay, does it have the, whatever it is, C2-3PO label on it? If not, that's the easy way to just kind of set that line in the sand. And so now we say, if I just wanted to post something that's authentic and I just wanted to put some subtitles on it, or I just wanted to put my logo on it, well, let's edit it. And Courtney, what you're describing with, the editing tools being able to determine what edits I've made, that's a huge, huge hurdle. So it seems like it's either, and the byproduct, by the way, is what we have with audio now, where because that's the top tier trusted content, everyone's just going to shoot, they're not going to edit. And we have horrible audio from, newscasters from CNN, and they sound like they're in a marble library where they don't care about audio. We're going to start getting raw shot footage because they can't touch it with an editor.
Courtney?
Yeah, the first place this stuff is going to be initiated in is security camera systems and setups, so that the security cameras will capture and authenticate stuff and watermark them as being original security camera capture for use in court cases, things like that, and for the police to use, so on, to make sure that somebody hasn't tampered with that security camera to keep them out of jail. And the second place is dash cams for capturing video in cars, anything that could be used for evidence, and uploaded just to make sure that it wasn't something that was created with AI. And the other thing is the AI generators, the people that do have image generation with AI are going to opt into it as well to mark it as not captured with a camera, that it was generated with AI. So it'll have that metadata built into it. The problem is if once the spec is published, and it probably has to be published, there's going to be people that figure out how to spoof it. And once somebody figures out how to spoof it, then there goes your security.
Alex.
And what Courtney said is the most important part to remember is that, if we start applying trust to something and someone's able to break that trust, it gives them a huge advantage. I think that it is good for people to stop believing what they're seeing. I think that they need to stop taking anything at the surface. You just can't look at a photo or a video or anything else and think that that's true. And the key here is to just have people not believe anything that they see at the surface level. It doesn't mean you don't believe anything. It just means that the first time you see an image or a video, you go, I don't know what happened there, and so I've worked on legal cases, big legal cases that a lot of people have seen. My father's worked on a lot of those where people are absolutely sure that person's guilty and they are absolutely not, and they've gone through the entire legal system and it was wrong, and really wrong, and so you just have to get that it's just not, the truth is not something that is this immovable thing that we're going to attach to things. It's very subjective, and it's often affected by many, many, many factors. And if you're not seeing data from lots of different sources, you don't know what's happening. And people have to get better at not understanding that they don't know. And I think that this whole thing is very healthy for us, because I think that we're going to get to a point where no one believes anything they see the first time they see it. And that is really important, because that should have been in their thought process for a century, maybe two. That when you read something, and you look at what people thought was real in the 30s, in the 40s, so many lies. And it's just that we all believe the same lies, as opposed to now we all believe different lies. And so you just have to really, I'm not saying not to believe anything, that there are no facts. What I'm saying is that you really have to do a lot of research, or you have to think that, I don't know. Like, I don't know how this is, what's actually happening. And so I think that the dissolution of this is really good for people over time, but there'll be some hiccups on the way.
Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York's up next. Morning, everyone. What remote signage software would the panel recommend using with a fleet of Samsung UN43DU 7200 TVs? And he's got a link there to it.
Alex.
I've been looking at digital signage, so I reached out to Phil Lenger a couple years ago to talk to him about it. He manages a lot of the digital signage for Times Square, and he is one of the OGs of office hours. And so what Phil suggested at the time was playsignage.com. This is the kind of a less expensive version, and the one that I think he uses the most is by a company called Senda. Senda. And so that's what they use for their signage. They do a lot of other things, but digital signage is one of them. And again, playsignage.com is one that he said was a little more cost effective. But those are two from someone who that's what they do, is digital signage.
Courtney.
It's been a while since I've used it, but on Dexter, occasionally we would use BrightSign, which they make little for kiosks and any type of signage, digital signage. This is going to be in public for touchscreens, things like that. So they connect over the internet, and you can update them with regular news stories, things like that. So it makes a pretty easy way to run multiple monitors using their network and the BrightSign software. But it does require you buy their little box, which connects and connects to the internet and then connects to your display and manages. They also have a lot of software and an API for arranging things and creating your own custom layouts, etc. So that's what I've been using. It's kind of has been a standard for a long time in the industry. I'm not sure about these newer ones that Alex mentioned. They may be better than BrightSign. Last time I used BrightSign was like 2012, so who knows?
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he wonders, has anyone ever tried using LM Studio for local large language models on Mac OS? I've been trying it out with the Mistral Nemo Instruct modules, and they are very good for local models on the desktop, and he's got a link.
Samuel.
Yeah, well, I've played a little bit with local models, not this one, but I've used it's called a GPT for all. And I've used it with the Llama models, the models that Meta releases. And it works quite well, but the thing is, it won't be as fast as using like ChatGPT unless you have a real fast internet or real fast computer with a powerful GPU. So that's kind of the limitation. So for me, I prefer to just use ChatGPT, but of course there might be specific reasons why you can't use the internet or can't use the online services.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What do you have connected to all the ports on your ATEM device?
Jeff.
I mean, it depends what I'm doing, but right here in office hours, I have in input 1 is the original Blackmagic 4K, and input 2 is just an iPad where I can bring up web pages and other things on the side. Nothing in input 3 and 4. Media player's got my chair without me in it, and then a little Lilliput 7-inch monitor for the multi-view.
Alex.
Yeah, I had to look to remember what so my main one, I usually say don't do this with the main camera, but I do it with my own because it's been stable. But my main camera is going into input 1. Input 2 is usually, it's a kind of a wild card. A lot of times it can be a second camera or it's a PC that I use to bring things in like Unreal and so on and so forth. My input 3 is, I'm using an extreme ISO. Number 3 is a Apple TV. That's kind of I can AirPlay any devices to it, so that's just a really quick and easy way to throw my phone view, an iPad, etc., into the system without thinking about it too much. And then I have 4 Mac Minis that go into the next ones. So, well, 5 Mac Minis technically. So I've got a Zoom /GFX, and so when I'm doing some graphics, I have that one. I have another one that shows apps. So if I want to show you an app while I'm presenting, I have that one there. I have my presentation machine, and then I have my one output from my Mac Studio that goes there so that I can drag things over if I want to show it to you. And then the last one is my telestrator. So that's what provides this. And you may wonder why you break these all up. If you're doing a lot of presentations, I do a lot of presentations. One of the things that I find frustrating is to either watch someone do the whole thing where they do the slide deck, but they don't ever hit play. They just kind of go, see the slides down, little film strip down the side. I find that it feels very amateur. When I did it for a little while and I was like, I don't like that. so I want it to be full screen. But I also don't want to have to go, when I want to show you an app or show you something else, I don't want you to, I don't want to have, okay, now I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to go out of my app and now I'm going to go into this other thing. And so what I can do is just cut. I can just cut between, okay, I'm going to talk about the app and there's a presentation and some slides. And then I can cut to the app. And actually show it to you, and then cut back again. And I like doing that. I also have sometimes some graphics that sit over top of everything, and that's why I have a graphics machine that does that. And then the telestrator can draw over top of anything I throw up there. So any video input from my iPhone, input from a PC, input from I can draw my presentations. I can draw on it. So separating those all out makes it, in my opinion, a much better class or a much better. It started because I was building classes, but a much better class or a much better presentation.
Bill.
Super simple in my case. I've got camera 1, which is what you see all the time. Camera 2, which is an over the shoulder, which I didn't actually turn on this morning, or I show it to you. Camera 3 is my iPad Pro because I do things on the show all the time. That's what usually feeds that kind of thing. That was when I was looking up the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. And 4 used to be the security camera feed around where I live. Now I've actually taken that out and put Apple TV in there because I occasionally want to watch something on the big screen while I'm working at my desk. That's it. Nothing else.
Courtney.
Yeah, I just have an ATEM Mini, so I don't have all those 8 inputs. I got 1 is the old camera here. Let's go to 3 first is my second screen out of my main computer that's hooked up to Zoom so that I can look stuff up and show it. 2 is also out of my computer. That's where I have my version of Alex's telestrator, but I don't have it currently piped into overlay yet, so so it's just sitting there doing nothing right now. And 4 is a separate that little GTK NUC computer that I use if I want to bring anything like a web page in with sound, because any of the feeds that come off my main computer, which is connected to Zoom, it's using my Rodecaster as the audio source, and Zoom, of course, only picks my microphone up off of that source, so I can't play anything with audio that comes off my main computer. So I have a separate computer that comes in, and the output of that computer, HDMI out of that computer, goes through a audio de-embedder, and then that audio signal is fed to my Rodecaster Pro as a separate input that I can then bring up and down, and that is fed into the ATEM through the HDMI input for number 4, and I disembed it and then bring it back into the Rodecaster Pro. It's very complex, but that's how it works.
Jeff, you had nothing to add?
A quick question for Alex about the Apple TV. Do you find any latency of the Apple TV running through your system?
Just a little. You might lose a frame or two, but nothing major. I mean, it's kind of amazing. It works incredibly well. I don't feel it like when I'm moving around. You can feel it like a jiggle, like it's like softness. So maybe it might be as much as, when I say 1 or 2 frames, it might be 3 to 4 frames. But I wouldn't try to lip sync to it. I wouldn't use it as a thing. But when you think about using it as I'm going to show you something like a handheld shot, and I want to show you something close up. I've been using Apple TVs for that for a long time, and oftentimes I'm demoing something on a phone. I'm doing a close up. Like we used it. I started using it because when we did the cooking shows, we would I'd have one camera on me. I had a little ATEM mini, the four inputs, one camera on me, one on the cutting board or work board, and one on the stove. And then I had this Apple TV with another phone, and they were all phones. We're doing them all with phones. And I had this little Apple TV, and the advantage of that Apple TV is I could grab a phone and just, it was sharing to the Apple TV, and I could show you something close up if I wanted to talk about it. And by the way, if you're wondering, if you jump into one of the training things that they do at Sur La Table or whatever, the online training with that kit, and you start asking questions, you get a lot of attention. Everyone else has a webcam.
That's a brilliant solution, bringing in the Apple TV. I don't know why I didn't think about that earlier. And Alex, are you just mirroring the iPhone to the Apple TV? Is that how you do it?
So I mirror it. I mirror it if I want to show you something on the phone. But if you if you have it set to mirroring and you open up something like the Blackmagic camera or other things like that, it'll automatically just send a clean feed out. Or you can have it. There's a setting in there that lets you set clean feed, and you can do that with Shoot, the app by Michael Forrest, as well as the Blackmagic camera. It won't work with the Apple built-in camera. It always shows you the interface. So you have to have some kind of third-party one. I mean, we used to use, there was one more that we used to use, but then they went to a subscription. All of us stopped using it. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, that was, I forget the name of that one too. For me, I've got an
Control, was it? Camera Control?
What?
Yeah. Camera Control.
No, it was really popular. Like, all of us used this one app for all of our filming. And the two things that happened were that they went to a subscription at the exact same time they went to subscription. Blackmagic released a camera, Filmic Pro. Yeah, and so we all use Filmic Pro, and then they went to subscription, and they might have been able to get away with that. But Blackmagic released a camera that was at least as useful as their camera for nothing. And so then we all forgot that they existed. So that's a
tough one. I mean, great talented people there, obviously, but man, it's a hard business.
Business models are complicated, especially when you have a really big company willing to give away software for free.
Yeah, for me, I've got an ATEM Extreme ISO, and two of those ports are from different computers. One of them is the one that I use to basically share my web browser. The other one, it's a bit complicated, but I've got an M2 Mac Mini that runs Mimo Live. For production, I pipe the program feed into my ATEM so that on a separate computer over the USB webcam, I can send the program back into the meeting so people can see live what they look like. And then the rest of those ports are just all cameras. So that is my setup, and it's great seeing how everybody else uses their ATEMs creatively for production. Next question.
Jeff Cohen here on the panel from Miami Beach, Florida. Would you consider any of the Zoom advanced audio modes, and below he notes original sound for musicians, high fidelity music mode, or live performance audio, accurate enough for collaborative audio mastering, EQ, and so forth?
Chris.
So you mean like as far as like musicians playing together and making that? I mean, the one thing that I'll just say that everyone should really bear in mind is that Zoom it's not an audio program, right? This is a communications program that allows a lot of different feature sets, but that is what it's made for, okay? And so when you're trying to get into like real dedicated workflows of really like reaching end results in a quality way, you need to realize that the more you use things, single items, be they hardware or software, that do a ton of different stuff, the more you end up really kind of like sacrificing in certain abilities. So for me, I mean, yeah, there's no usable audio anything within Zoom other than just talking to someone, because anything else that I'm doing, I have Pro Tools, I have WaveLab, I have real like professional audio applications that are going to give me all the tools and things that I need, versus trying to the whole basis of Zoom is that all the audio corrections that Zoom offers you is assuming that all of the consumer grade users that are using it are in horrible environments. And so when you're in these terrible environments, here's some really handy things you can click on that will add sophisticated noise gates, things like that, and try and correct this stuff for you. But it's not a professional audio application in any way, shape, or form, and it never will be, because the companies that are making professional audio applications, the things they do are already so beyond. It's apples and oranges completely, and so you got to use these things for what they are, depending on what your needs are.
Jeff.
So I have used Zoom to do basic editing with a musician where I want them to listen to some edits of things. And in that case, original sound for musicians, high fidelity music mode, stereo, and I'll patch my Pro Tools feed directly in, and then I have a mic for myself that I can talk to them, that I can turn off, because you obviously need to turn that off if they want to hear the music. Is that critical? No. For critical, I would go with Audio Movers Listen To. Source Connect is the other one Mickey mentioned in the chat. This allows you to have actual high fidelity wave audio that you can send to them. They get a link. They can either put it right directly in a plugin in their DAW, or they can just you can send them a web link and they can get that. So this is great for a non-technical producer who needs to listen to something. You can drop this into your DAW on your master bus and it feeds right over to them. I've used that in sync with a Zoom session. And I know people that actually go into their Zoom settings and look at the latency of their current Zoom session video, and they'll match the latency setting in Audio Movers so that they actually get, when they're playing back and visually showing their Pro Tools timeline in the Zoom session, that the audio that is coming over Audio Movers is very much in sync with that. For my purposes, that's a little overkill, because what I want them to do is listen to audio, not look at waveforms. But if you actually want to do that, then you could do that as well.
Alex.
I will say that Zoom probably has, especially with the latest updates, it has the best. If you had to use it, it has the best audio. That is, it is clearly better than every other tool like it. Whether it's Teams or Meet or other things like that. But yeah, I wouldn't use it as something that I would record an album on. Another one to look at for collaboration, and we've had him on the show, is Dan Tepfer's FarPlay, and that allows for very low latency. And I believe it double ends, but I'm not 100% sure. One of the things we'd love to see is Zoom start to double end records. That would make it a little bit different. You can do that if you have the devices, so you can have someone listen to it, give you feedback. And I think it'd be close enough to give some people some feedback on what's going on. You're not going to refine it. It's kind of like if you're mixing something in surround, you can get into the ballpark with a near field mixing, room, but you're not going to be able to finish it until you have it on a stage. so you, in the same way, you could get closer to some of those things when everything's dialed up, but you still need to record the source material and really clean it up later.
Bill.
In my thinking, if I'm staying on my desk for my audio work, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in what I see, because most of the Mac audio, and I'm on Mac, you might be on PC, all the APIs and the calls are the same. I was surprised to find that in Final Cut, all my audio APIs and processing is exactly the same. Plugins are exactly the same as in Logic. And that's used for high-end work. So it's not that the internal stuff is any different from all these programs. In fact, I remember the show I was on with Michael Cioni, and he uses the multi-track video system in Final Cut to do some of his multi-track recording. And because it's calling those same APIs inside the machine, he was getting superb quality out of that. That was fine. It's when you go into the outside world that all of these problems and try to collaborate with people through all these external links, that latency goes to heck in a handbasket, and I don't think anybody that I've seen has solved that. So it just depends on whether you're staying inside or going outside, in my mind at least.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, just really quickly, and I don't know just if I misunderstood the question, but just to, again, all of these situations that everyone is saying, Zoom is not, it's just a pass-through. It's all of that editing, the EQ, all of the actual processing is happening in another DAW in all of these examples, and Zoom is just feeding it there. So just to reiterate that Zoom itself is not EQing anything, it's not compressing anything, it does not give you any of those feature sets. It is a standalone system that will pass along, but you're going to need an actual real tool to do those jobs, and then use Zoom as the bridge to get it there.
Jeff?
Yeah, and thank you everyone for all the great input. Yeah, it's not really a question about which tool to use because yes, for example, for voiceover, Source Elements is, still kind of the king of the land for doing live sessions, but that's really more about, solving the latency problem. So I guess I am a little surprised to hear a lot of the folks saying that even, for example, in high fidelity mode, that you don't think it's accurate. And Chris, to your point, yeah, I'm not talking about, recording a session, but for example, because a lot of clients have Zoom, obviously they say, well, just play that back to me, whatever you recorded, just play that back. But Chris,
okay,
for
so you
example,
mean as a
if I wanted to bring up, screen share my DAW and say, what do you think? Does this sound good? Maybe I can tweak the EQ a little bit like that. That's what I'm asking. And I'm wondering if, we go into high fidelity music mode, because you're right, by the way, Zoom was not originally intended, but one of the things that happened from the pandemic is with bands wanting to play together, we got some of these audio enhancements later down the road. So I am surprised if the consensus is that no, even in high fidelity mode, to the question that you don't think it's accurate.
Well, this actually is how I work in how I do most of my sessions being remote. And it's actually just very quickly, I am using Zoom, but I'm using it to just share desktop, just to share my screen, and also for the remote control function. And then I stream audio movers out of Pro Tools. And that has just been such an easy way. Sometimes people don't want to actually see what's going on, and it's easy to spit them a link. Also, if I have an artist at the airport waiting, I can send a link to their cell phone, and we can be mixing their record for the 3 hours that they're waiting for their flight. I do this all the time. I had an artist call me the other day. His kids were at gym, and he's like, I'm in my car for an hour. I was like, cool. I streamed him, and for an hour we were mixing his song. So it's really, really, absolutely, I do that all day, and it's the best. So,
Jeff Francis.
So I dug up, I need to redo these tests because these are actually from October of 2020 when Zoom added the original sound. And here's a frequency response graph through Zoom, which starts to drop off about 18K. It's fairly flat. The big thing is that, remember, this is data compressed audio. So it's fine for reference. It's fine for a producer to listen and check someone's voiceover delivery. It's not fine for capturing that delivery. And it's probably not fine for precise listening about EQ and those kind of decisions. So that's where Audio Movers or Source Connect is really
just to add, though, high fidelity music mode specifically on paper is supposed to solve that. In other words, not doing the compression or noise filtering or any of that other stuff.
Right. It's not doing, but it's still doing data compression. It's still lossy data compression like an MP3 or an MP4 AAC. So it is still, that's supposed to be psychoacoustically inaudible, but we know if the bit rate drops, we can hear those problems. So it still has to reduce the bit rate in order to reduce the demands of shipping this across the internet.
Alex.
And the problem with any kind of compression is it's fine if you don't do anything to it later, but if you want to stretch it at all, like anytime you do, is like EQ is like doing a levels or a curves to your image. You're going to suddenly see a bunch of stuff that was not, you didn't see there in an image or hear it in if you're doing any adjustments. And so that compression is a big deal. I will say I'd love to see Jeff do this test now that the new 48K solution has been rolled out. So 48 is now available. It'd be great to see, with all the work that Zoom has done over the last 4 years, it'd be great to see those signal responses again.
Jeff.
Yeah, I'll try to find some time to do that. I will, since it's this audio day, I will make that reminder that I've done before. When we say the word compression, we need to be extraordinarily careful about which type of compression we're talking about, because there is dynamic range compression, which is compressors, limiters, expanders, and gates that are working on the levels of our things, and that's an audio tool that we use all the time. And then there is data compression, things like MP3, MP4, AAC, Michael Graves in the chat says Music Mode uses the Opus codec. We have 1 million codecs out there which are trying to do psychoacoustically shaped data reduction, bit rate reduction. They're trying to get the same audio with less data. That is very different type of compression than, an 1176 compressor.
Yeah, 100%. That was a great discussion. Let's move to the next question.
Peter Moore is coming back in from Auckland, New Zealand now for our audio gurus. 44.1 and 1024 buffer size versus 48K and 512 or 256. Can you refresh my memory on why you sometimes need to reduce the buffer sizes when using 48K versus 44.1 or not? Thanks.
Chris.
So those are two separate things. Okay, so when you're talking about sample rates, this is per second. How many samples per second of information in digital data is being grabbed, right? So you've got 44.1, you jump up to 48, right? You've got these different iterations going up to 96, 192, and you'll see they frequently double or half. And so that's the amount of information that's being captured. The playback buffer is actually how much power is being allocated to the program to run these things. The inherent attribute of higher playback buffers is you get latency. So let's say you're in Pro Tools and you're recording, you want that playback buffer to be as low as possible without, at a certain point, your system you might get errors and crash, and you'll know, okay, this is my limit. I got to go maybe up to 128 because I can't do 64 or can't do 32. So you'll get a less latency while you're tracking. But anytime that you're doing any actual production work, you want that as high as possible because that buffer is going to just allocate power to your system to run it efficiently. And that's one thing that's really powerful when you get into like the Apollos and things like that, these systems that will give you real-time latency-free monitoring, is that you can have that buffer in your DAW maxed all the time, and you can be tracking with no latency and added plugs, plugins, whatever, emulations of things, and it's just super helpful. So.
Courtney.
Yeah, Chris covered it fairly carefully. That has to do with your A to D conversion from analog to 44.1 PCM or 48K or 96, et cetera. The buffer takes place, if you're trying to do playback, you want lowest latency because you want your recording and playback to stay in sync with each other. And so the lower the buffer size, the lower the latency. The smaller the buffer size, the lower the latency, because it's first in, first out with that data as it's converted from digital to analog, and analog to digital on the converse way. And then if you're talking about streaming, I wasn't sure if you were talking about 512 or 256 bit rate on compressed audio. That's different. But if you're just talking about in Pro Tools or something like that for your A to D conversion, you got to remember to keep the buffer size small enough, large enough so that you don't have buffer overrun, so that it can process that outgoing data fast enough so that you don't run out of audio in the buffer and have it pause or have it glitch because your buffer is the wrong size.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. What does the panel think about the new Behringer wing updates? They are impressive for the price point, but I've heard Behringer support leaves a lot to be desired, and he's got a link to the wing there.
Chris.
Yes. So I have absolutely dealt with the service department, mostly for Midas, which is owned by Behringer, and it is the slowest, worst thing ever. And that's my real answer. It is incredibly unhelpful, and it's the amount of time. You're down. This is like 6-8 weeks that your unit is out, which means you're renting something. I believe I was paying for my own shipping in regards, even when it was covered under warranty, and it was just a very slow, drawn-out process. There was a place that for a short while I found that was actually an hour outside of Chicago. That was the only authorized repair center in the U.S. aside from their Las Vegas location, which was a real treat to have. And then they went away, and it just all kind of, dissipated. But yeah, you got to pretty much send this stuff to Las Vegas, and it is like get a ticket and wait. Has been my experience multiple times with them. So, unfortunately.
Alex.
It's a strong feature set. The support has always been problematic. The good news is that it costs often less than half of what the other things are, so you can just buy two. so you can, so I mean, for the same, if you were going, I'm going to buy this or that, we'll just buy two of these, and then that. We used to do this a lot with Blackmagic. People would say, well, you can't, the Blackmagic stuff, is not very repairable, or it does all this stuff. I was like, yeah, but I can afford to buy 2 or 3 of those, or 4 or 5 of them, other than the next thing up. So it was, so you can have backups, even use one for parts. So that's another thing to kind of think about, is that Behringers are so much less expensive that oftentimes you can have a backup in a way that you wouldn't have with another device. But I think that I'm interested to see, what the quality of the audio is. The X32s are not known for instance, I wouldn't run a bunch of mics into them if I didn't have to, and we've used them as stage boxes and other things. The preamps have not been particularly good. The Wing is supposed to be using Midas inputs, and so maybe they're better. So we'd have to look at that. It looks like they rewrote all of the software, so that looks pretty positive. So we'll see.
Yeah, and that has been my experience too. It's a tough one with Behringer. Just a reminder, coming up on the second hour, we have a fantastic conversation with a great panel who's going to be led by Chris Sabato to talk about vMix audio, from all the inputs to the outputs. So that's going to be great. Stick around for that. Thursday is going to be a Q&A day, and Friday we've got Oren McAllister, client engagement specialist at NaviLens. We'll explain the accessibility provided through this visual assistive technology platform. So that's coming up in a minute. Stick around for the second hour on vMix. We'll see you in a minute.
Yesterday, we talked about